it's like being on a boat. Because if things are going great, everyone goes to one side of the boat and it's like, things are going great. And the boat sort of kind of tips this way. And only the leader can go to the other side and kind of balance it and say, hey, here's some ways that it's not going great or that it could go better.
As a leader, it can feel like you get pulled in a million different directions. So how do you balance it all? And what does balance really look like? Welcome to How Leaders Lead. I'm David Novak, and every week I have conversations with the very best leaders in the world to help you become the best leader that you can be. My guest today is Tom Hale, the CEO of Oura. Oura makes one of the most innovative health and wellness wearables out there, the Oura Ring. And under Tom's leadership, the company has scaled rapidly while staying focused on helping people live healthier, more balanced lives. And that word, balance, really captures how Tom leads. He's always calibrating between vision and execution, innovation and trust, supporting his team and challenging them. And in this conversation, you'll see what it looks like to lead from the place of balance. Because let me tell you, the world is moving faster than ever. And the leaders who thrive in it are the ones who bring a balancing force to their people and their priorities without losing their center. So here's my conversation with my good friend and soon to be yours, Tom Hale. Before we get into Oura, I've got to ask you, how much sleep did you get last night and what was your readiness score this morning?
Let me check. So it would appear that I got about almost 7 hours, which is pretty good for me. And my readiness is 91, which is extremely good, I'm going to say. And that's because it's Sunday night, to Monday night. I get a good night's sleep in on a Sunday night.
So you got that good sleep and your readiness score is good. What's readiness mean?
Well, so the story of the ring is a couple pretty interesting things. One is that by tracking overnight, you get to see someone's physiology at rest. And that's really powerful because every night over night, you're kind of seeing the body in the same state. There's no confounding factors during the day, like you're running around, boss yells at you, something else that could make the day be a little bit noisy. At night, it's pretty level. Your body also goes through a very typical cycle of changes as you go into deep sleep and into REM sleep and waking up based on your chronotype. So it's actually a really great time to measure somebody. And one of the things that started very early on in the product is that we wanted to measure sleep. That's where it started. And so as a result, you kind of have this nighttime wear pattern. People wore the ring, the first ring, they only wore it at night. It was this enormous, looks like a ring that maybe had been dropped from an alien spaceship and landed on the side of a Nordic fjord. And then, trolls had polished it. It was big, looked like a Super Bowl ring, but you would wear it at night. And the thing is that unlocked the ability to say, well, how's your day going to go the next day based on your biometrics from the previous night? And that became readiness. And basically, the way people use it is they wake up and they go, oh, how did I sleep? And they check their little app and they say, oh, my readiness is 92 today. I'm normally a 75. I'm going to have a great day because my heart rate is low. I had a good night's sleep. My heart rate variability is high. My respiration is low. Like all these things that would indicate, biometrically, that you're going to have a very good high performance day. That's what readiness is. It's a score from 1 to 100 that tells you how's your day going to go.
Fantastic. And, I loved reading a lot of your customer reviews in my research, and you've got phenomenal reviews on the Oura Ring. And one of the takeaways that one customer said is that it's like having my personal lab. When you think about Oura, and you think about the kinds of things that you'll measure and you'll give a customer, where do you see that going?
Well, I think you're right. The personal part of it is really important, meaning that it's not some generic information that could be applied to anybody. It's applied to you and applied to your situation and your day because your physiology is not fixed. It changes over the day. It changes over the months. It changes over the years. If you're a woman, it changes every 30 days. And so that change in your physiology is really powerful. And targeting and personalizing to you is, I think, one of the sort of secret sauces of the Oura Ring. It actually gets to know you over the course of onboarding. The first, sort of couple of weeks, it's sort of figuring out what normal looks like for you. I'll give you a really interesting example. One of the things that we measure is temperature. And so temperature, of course, if you have an elevated temperature, that could be a sign of you being sick, or maybe you had some alcohol or some other factor that's driving your temperature high. And of course, not, everyone knows what normal human temperature is, right? David, what is it?
Yeah, 98.6.
98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. But the truth is that not everybody has a normal baseline temperature of 98.6. In fact, one of my colleagues at work, his normal baseline temperature is 98.1 degrees. So when he goes to the doctor and they put a thermometer in his mouth at the doctor's office and they say, hey, your temperature is 98.6, you know what he's got? A fever.
Yeah, fever.
Right. So this idea that the Oura Ring gets to know you, it's such a powerful, maybe kind of idea behind this product, is that everybody's different. Everybody's health condition, their life circumstances, their fitness level, all these things are different. And so getting to know you is really powerful. And then if you can kind of translate that into a set of insights, words that the system is telling you about how today is going to go, or how your health is doing, or numbers that help you track it, you start to see really interesting insights more at the margins. And I'll give you a pretty interesting example. Another colleague at work, his wife was going through chemotherapy, and he could see her scores. And so in seeing her scores, he actually had a sense of sort of how her day was going. And so, for example, he might see that her biometrics were somewhat depressed, her readiness was low, maybe her heart rate was elevated, her temperature was elevated. And then he would change his behavior that day to better support his partner. He might come home from work early, or pick up the kid, or prepare dinner, whatever it was. He had this really maybe insight about what was going on with his partner's physiology in a way that maybe she couldn't even say, because it was on the margins. It wasn't like, she was laid out and couldn't move. It was just like she didn't feel great. And instead of her having to say, hey, I don't feel great, could you pick up the kid from school and make dinner? He knew that, and he knew it in a way that was trustworthy and accurate and scientifically validated. And I think that's just incredibly powerful. So this idea of where we're going is we want to give your body a voice. And the thing is, your body does have a voice, and usually if it's talking to you, you're going to listen. But sometimes it's hard to hear and it's hard to understand. And that's a lot of what Oura does.
I love that idea, the word picture of giving your body a voice. It's a great, clear communication of what your vision is. How did you develop this capability to be that concise about what you're really trying to do and come up with a phrase like that?
Well, I think that's a tall order. If you can come up with something that's what I like to refer to as impactfully brief, and I talk a lot to my team about the importance of impactful brevity, because it's really important to not say a lot, but say a lot. And if you can say a lot in a small amount of space, it's really powerful. It's great. It's a great leadership attribute.
Yeah.
So how did we do it? Great question. We worked at it for quite some time. We had a lot of people working on it who, went through like a 6 to, I think, 7 week process of talking about what our vision was and all the different permutations of it, all the details. And then finally somebody came back and said, hey, we got a couple of ideas for you. This is one of them, and we really like it. And we said, what is it? And they said, it's giving your body a voice. We're like, that's it. You nailed it. And so in some sense, I think that's true of most creative processes. You want to give a really clear brief. You want to give people the opportunity to really, expand their thinking as broadly as possible, and then come back and narrow down to the one or two things that are really the best ideas.
Yeah. Oftentimes, being in the marketing world myself, it's like I used to say, when it's great, there's no debate. When you hear a phrase like that, giving your body a voice, you kind of go, oh, that's it. Not a whole lot of debate about that. There might be debate about the process of getting there, and but that just pops out and really makes so much sense. Tom, I want to get into how you're leading at Oura, but first I want to learn more about your journey and what's a story from your childhood that really shaped the kind of leader you are today?
So I was an athlete as a kid. I used to track my workouts. I was a cyclist, and so I would write down all my numbers. How fast, how far, what my resting heart rate was, what my peak heart rate was, and it was pretty rudimentary what we had. So that really, I think, can't call it data orientation around fitness, has always been a part of my life. I've always had wearables. I've always tried every piece of technology I might possibly use to optimize my performance. And I think I brought that very much with me to Oura. But the thing about Oura when I joined it was a relatively small company. It was a few hundred folks, largely based in Finland. It was maybe a challenging time. If you remember 2022, the spring of 22 was right after COVID. I think the Ukraine war had just begun and the stock markets were swooning. It was kind of a challenging moment. And, I kind of it came onto the company and I had to sort of set a course for the company. And for me, the course that I wanted to set was, hey, we have this big mission in the company, which is that we want to make health a daily practice. We want to change health from being intervention at the end of life to being prevention over the course of your entire life so that you live a better life longer. That's what we're all about. And that mission, by the way, is super motivating for employees. And everybody signs up for that mission. Like, can we make the healthcare experience better? You betcha. Can we help people live better lives longer? You betcha. How do we do that is really the question. And the thing was is that we had also kind of lost sight of the fact that, like, if we weren't successful as a business, we weren't going to be able to fulfill that mission. And so the first thing that I had to do was kind of combine the mission with the reality that we had to be a better business. And those two things had to come glued together.
Do you mean by business, you mean a business model that makes money, or?
Yeah, we couldn't, if we were the best company in the world and didn't make money, we wouldn't be able to fulfill our potential or fulfill our mission. And if we didn't stay focused on making money and being a great business, then we weren't going to actually have as big of an impact on the world as we could. And I think that idea of kind of blending the two ideas, this idea that we were a performing company as a performance company, as well as a company that had a big mission around people's health, those two ideas had to come together. And the idea was pretty simple. It was that we make a product that allows people to look at their metrics to understand how to optimize their life or make decisions about their life or their health. And I said, we have our metrics in our own business, and we need to look at those metrics, and we need to look at those metrics and use them to drive our business, because the business metrics that come out of the business is just like your biometrics coming off your body, and you have to optimize it. So I used to call it an idea and a bit of language that made sense to everybody, because that's what the product did. And that's what we did. We built a really high performing, really, really successful business in that moment, because everyone realized that it wasn't enough to just be great and have the best product. We had to build a great business. Now, you had asked a question. Your question was, what is it about your growing up that, like, kind of, connects to that? And I said, well, look, it's really about being, someone who tracked everything and analyzed it, tried to understand it. But there's another element as well. And I think anybody in business knows this, which is that sometimes it's not about just skill, or it's not just about leadership. It's not just about knowing what to do or doing it, which are important things in business. Sometimes it's about luck. And I think
I've had plenty of that.
we've all seen that, and kind of, that combination of being ready at the moment when luck strikes or when the opportunity surfaces. And that is the key, being ready. And that goes back to, like, if you create a performance culture, when the market starts to sort of warm up and you see some opportunities, and then you can really capitalize on that, that's what drives the outsized performance. And, I think that's where Oura is today. We've grown this business, north of 100% a couple of years in a row. We're at a scale which is, very, very significant from a revenue standpoint. We flipped over to profitability. All these things that are great about the business, but what they are in service of is fulfilling this mission. So you want to have both. You want to be able to see, kind of the performance of the business coupled with kind of the passion, the things that move people, that move their hearts, is we want to make a difference in the world. We want to wake up every morning and make people healthier and happier and live longer. And that's a great reason to make a great business.
With technology being what it is today, you almost have to be a scientist to do your job.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think when I got to the company, I was pretty much a software person, by and large, and I'd always been kind of science and math oriented. But what you realize here is that to make these things work, there's the interaction of physiology, physics, software algorithms, scientific validation of those software algorithms, and a user experience, like a software user experience. So of those 5 or 6 things, I had experience in maybe one of them. And thank goodness that we have an incredibly capable science team at the company. Some 30 plus PhDs who, these people are incredible. They're specialists in, the physics of light. They're specialists in physiology, in biomechanics. in all these very, very important and very, very rigorous kind of areas. And so one of the things that I think has been incredible for me is the opportunity to learn about all of the um, really interesting things that the ring does or is capable of doing, or what it might do in the future based on its capabilities, but also the way we validate it. We have massive research studies to make sure that we get people of every health condition and every ethnicity and every skin color, to make sure that the data that the ring is generating covers them and meets some standard of accuracy that is extremely high. We want to be as close to a clinical grade that we can be, and in some cases exceed that. We just don't happen to be we don't happen to be regulated as a medical device. We're not a medical device, but we aspire to the level of accuracy and the level of quality that would be appropriate for a medical device. And that's such a powerful idea, because that means that you have to be really good. This is not, good enough is not good. It has to be great. And so again, if you're thinking about leading any organization, I always think you have to throw, the stone twice as far to go half the distance. You have to set a huge aspiration so that you can inspire people to do the impossible. And if they only make it halfway, it's still incredible because you made it. We throw that rock twice as far, and in science and in accuracy, we make it. We make it all the way there. And so it's just it's such an important lesson, I think, for any leader to realize that they need to push further, farther, faster than they think is possible, and to push outside the boundaries of what's known. And when you're doing that, you end up making new science. And that's very inspiring for our scientists and PhDs, that they get to create something that hadn't existed before.
Yeah, and as you go outside the boundaries, how do you stay in tune with what your customers are really looking for?
Well, I think it starts by talking to your customers a lot, and we do that through a lot of different ways. We have something called the Inner Circle, which is about 2,000 folks who are like on the leading edge of anything we develop, and they're constantly giving us feedback as we introduce new things, and we iterate over the product very, very quickly with them, with their feedback. We also listen to kind of these broad-based communities, whether it's Reddit or Facebook. We kind of interface there to gather information from kind of the signal of the room tone of what's actually going on out in the world. And then I make it a point, and I make it a point for all of my leaders, that we have conversations with members, whenever we can. I make a point of my Thursday morning being a block of time, which I set aside for conversations with customers and interactions with customers, because there's no substitute for a direct interaction. When someone, recently someone, sent me a note and said, "Hey, this is not working out the way I want it to work out. And I got a problem, and I need, you to do something about that." When I engage on that, I'm learning something. I'm learning about something about our business that needs to be fixed or improved or bettered. And that means I will be a better leader, and I can push on the organization to raise the bar. And I could do that credibly because I have an example. Conversely, I got a reach out from somebody who said, "I had the best customer experience I've ever had with your company. I thought you should know." And that kind of insight, that's gold, because it teaches you what you're doing right, and you should do more of that.
Absolutely. And your background is clear that you are in some really interesting, creative companies where you got prepared to step into this role and to begin to make a difference in terms of changing the world. So, you've been in a number of really great companies. I just kind of like to pull out a few of the highlights from some of the learnings that you got along the way. And for example, you were at Adobe, which is a great software company. And what was the biggest lesson you learned about leadership at Adobe?
Well, it's funny. I got to Adobe on the back of an acquisition of a company called Macromedia. I'd been at Macromedia for 10 years. Some people may remember this. They made tools for people to make websites during web, kind of 1.0. Had a product named Flash. Flash enabled, kind of sound and audio interactions games. So I was at this company called Macromedia. And when Adobe acquired Macromedia, they took a lot of the leaders from Macromedia and made them leaders at Adobe. And Adobe was a much larger company, maybe 6,000 employees to our, call it maybe 1,800 or 2,000 employees, something like that. And they put us, me included, in these roles. And they were very thoughtful about it, because what they didn't want was a bunch of these, young people who thought they were really great to come in and like, ruin things that were great about Adobe. It's a very, very successful company, very mature, very thoughtful. We were kind of like maybe more like a startup, kind of entrepreneurial and willing to try anything and willing to do it, at a pace that was really unreasonably fast. So they came in and they said, listen, we have some advice for you guys. Here's the first piece of advice. When you're in a group of people at Adobe and there's maybe, 100 or 200 people listening to you, be really thoughtful about what you say. Because you might find that if you're not thoughtful, and by the way, as a group, I think at Macromedia, we're more like, let's think with our mouths. Let's go. Let's have the ideas. Let's get them out there. Let's go. And like kind of getting people excited. It's a bit, be thoughtful, because you might just say something that you don't really mean. And then 6 months later, you're going to look around and you're going to see that 250 people are off working on something just because you thought you had an interesting harebrained idea. And we're like, oh, that's super interesting. You're saying we should use our ears more than we use our mouths. We should be listening to what's going on, not trying to generate, as you do in a smaller company, where the ideas are the currency of keeping people motivated. So that was one of the big lessons that we learned from Macromedia and Adobe. And Adobe is an incredibly successful company because it is so thoughtful. It is so considered.
And Tom, how about Linden Lab, where you were the chief product officer, and there you designed the revamp of Second Life?
Well, Second Life was one of the very early on virtual worlds. And now it's very typical, right? People go into 3D spaces and do stuff and play video games with each other. This was relatively early on. And, one of the things that it had gotten really successful early in kind of the early 2000s. It had, kind of jumped up to be I think it was about 100 million in revenue, give or take, or something like that. And it was on the cover of Time magazine. People were really interested in this idea that you could buy virtual goods like, fashion or architecture or stuff like that. And it didn't cost anything. It was just bits on a server. What was happening when I arrived was everything was switching to the web. All social media was just starting to happen about 2007, 2008. So social media was becoming a thing. And all of that was like on your mobile device or, on the web, with Facebook and Facebook games and stuff like that. And so as a leadership team, we realized we really needed to like transform the company to take advantage of this new opportunity, and that we needed to go and figure out, how we were going to address this changing world where people were spending all this time, on websites, clicking on likes and thumbs up and that kind of stuff, instead of these really rich immersive experiences where you're inside of a virtual world in 3D. And we tried and we failed. And so the lesson is that like, if you really want to try and do something different, sometimes you can't do it with just the same people. You might need to find the new people with the new outlook and the new skills and the new capabilities to address a new opportunity. And I've always thought about that, because it's just it's a tempting thing to say we were great at this, and so that we're also going to be great at this other thing. We were great at 3D virtual worlds, so we're going to be great at social media. Well, turns out that's not always true.
and then you were the chief product and officer, and you became the chief operating officer at HomeAway. What's something you picked up there that really shaped your leadership?
Well, HomeAway was very early on in what is now known as vacation rentals by owner, or Vrbo, or many people know it as Airbnb. The thing that I took away there, and I think this goes to, how do you think about leadership inside of a company? In a tech company, your tech leadership needs to be empowered. And when I got to the company, HomeAway was an amazing company. It had acquired some 25 different websites and kind of pulled them all together. And, in many ways, like the SEO benefits of all those websites were driving the business. If you were looking for a rental in the south of France, you were going to end up on a HomeAway site. That was where you were going to end up. And what we had to do was re-platform all of those sites onto one platform so we could run it efficiently, and then add e-commerce to it so you could book those sites. You had to be able to book them. And so the change that was really required was we had to go to our technical leadership and say, hey, you guys actually have a really, really important vote in what we do. You're not there to take orders from anybody else. And if someone tries to tell you to take their order, Like I need this, get this done. I need it done by Tuesday. You need to be able to tell them that that's not the right thing because we're doing something here. We're going to bring these 25 sites together onto a common platform, and that's our mission. And you need to be strong in that mission. You need to be the leaders of that mission. And I think in many ways it was a change in our technical culture. The engineers and programmers who write the code to think of themselves not as people who were receiving people's instructions, but as the people who were giving them. And that transformation, it took a couple of years, and it took a lot of coaxing and kind of getting people out of their comfort zone to kind of say, hey, and we used to call it, we had this phrase for it. We called it developer spine. They had to learn that no one could push them around, and that in fact that when it came down to the most important things, they had to be the drivers of that change.
Yeah, developing your spine makes that's something we all have to learn. And then and then at SurveyMonkey, which is the world's most popular survey platform, you were, as I understand it, celebrating this big acquisition with Zendesk, and then it fell apart. What did it teach you about the role of a leader when plans suddenly change, when you go from exaltation to, oh shit?
Well, yeah, and that was certainly actually a big one too. I think I kind of knew it actually the day that that Zendesk, who was the acquiring company, announced it. I kind of had this feeling in my gut that it was not going to go well. I think that leaders have particularly a CEO. I was not the CEO at the time, but this is true of CEOs, maybe most true of it. That in some sense, when things are going great, right, the CEO has to be the one who says, "Hey guys, things are going great, but bad news could be right around the corner, and we got to be careful that we don't rest on our laurels or get overconfident. We've got to be thinking about where we're going next. We got to aim higher for the future. We got to watch out for these threats." And I liken it to like being on a boat, because if things are going great, everyone goes to one side of the boat and it's like things are going great, and the boat sort of kind of tips this way, and only the leader can go to the other side and kind of balance it and say, "Hey, here's some ways that it's not going great or that it could go better." And conversely, and this is the example with SurveyMonkey and Zendesk, when people are all, they're down in the mouth because they feel like everything's going poorly, they all go to that side of the boat and they're like, "Oh my God, woe is me, we're doomed." The leader has to be the one who says, "No, actually, there's light in this darkness. And if you follow me, we're going to make it. We're going to get to the other side." And I think that kind of maybe power and need and responsibility of a leader is to kind of be that counterbalance. Now, I believe in something called servant leadership, where the leader actually is in service of everybody, everybody who works at the company. It's not, "I'm going to tell you what to do and you need to do it this way, and I'm the expert and I'm the smartest one." It's like, how do I get the best out of you? How do I make you do your best work? And so you have to have both of those. You have to have this ability to balance the boat by saying things that people don't either see or agree or understand, and leading them to a new place. But you also need to be able to say, "Hey, as a leader, I'm here to make you successful, and that's my goal."
Hey everyone, it's Kula from How Leaders Lead. And if you've watched our podcast for any number of episodes, you probably know that a common theme from all of the great leaders we interview is that they are active learners. They have this commitment to continuing to learn and grow so that they don't stay stagnant, and so that they continue to see success in their leadership and in their life. This theme of active learning is so important, and it's what David's latest book, How Leaders Learn, is all about. It's all about helping you develop that skill of active learning so that you too can continue to see success in your leadership and in your life. The book is really entertaining. It pulls stories from some of our greatest podcast guests and pairs those stories with insights that you can incorporate into your leadership and into your life right away. Grab How Leaders Learn on Amazon or wherever books are sold. And I think you're really going to love it. You feel David's personality through the pages and through his storytelling, and it's a really powerful way to level up your leadership.
What do you think, if you could pick one thing, what do you think is the most important thing a leader has to do with people to make them recognize that they can rise and they can achieve and be even more than what they are today?
Well, it's a great question, and I think you're sort of in this business today a little bit. You're trying to find out what it is that motivates somebody, and if you can figure out what it is that motivates them, maybe conversely, what it is that demotivates them, you can help them understand what's possible, and you can ask them to do things that they didn't think they could do. I'll go back to the developer spine example. A lot of times, like there wasn't any problem with the developers being leaders. They were perfectly capable of being leaders, but they just sort of had come to believe that in this company they didn't have a vote. They didn't have a seat at the table, and so I had to say to them, "Listen, you guys. Not only do you have a vote, but it's an important one, and you guys need to rise and you need to see that glass of water at the center of the table and say, hey, I am going to take a sip of that. That glass is the glass of leadership. I'm going to grab it. I'm going to drink it. And then, I'm going to be a leader too. And that idea of inspiring people to do something that they don't think they can do, or maybe don't feel capable of doing. We have a way of talking about it at Oura, and I'll call it, this is a quote that I'll make from my colleague, Michael Chapp. He's the one who told me about it, and I love it. He says, listen, you got to get outside of your comfort zone, because when you get outside of your comfort zone, that's where the magic happens. And that's what the leadership has to do, is to help you get outside of your comfort zone.
When you stepped into the role of CEO of Oura, how comfortable were you? I mean, what brought you to Oura, and why are you sitting at that desk today?
Well, let me just say this. It was a big step. And maybe I was pretty far outside of my comfort zone. Maybe that's why that comment really resonates with me. It was a complicated business. It was a new space. I was climbing a learning curve that was as steep as any as I've ever climbed. And I had a great reserve of passion and energy and love for the product. And the reason for that was because after the Zendesk SurveyMonkey situation, I'd lost sleep for the first time in my life. And I got this product and it changed my life. And so I was very personally motivated and very personally passionate about the potential for Oura. And that kind of came through, even though it was outside of my comfort zone. That passion carried me through the discomfort. And I think people saw that. I think they, every employee, if you asked them today, if they were there when I got there, would they say, hey, was it obvious that Tom loved this product and that believed that it was going to be incredible and that this company was going to be a once in a generation company? And they would say, absolutely. Came right through, shone through his eyes like some light.
How did you develop the know-how on the brand and the category that, gave people a sense that you really did know what needed to be done and that they would follow you? Because, you've got, before people will follow you, they got to feel like you actually know what you're talking about.
I mean, it's so true. If they don't trust you, they don't follow you. In fact, an old boss of mine used to say, how can you tell the leaders in the room, Tom? And I'd be like, I don't know, the one with the leadership qualities. And he'd say, no, the followers. That's how you know who the leaders are. And his point was that, leaders aren't always at the top of the org chart, right? They're the ones that people follow. So how did I do it? I honestly, I think a couple of things. One is luck. I'd been somebody who had been using wearables since the early 2000s. So I kind of, I had some skills and some understanding. But I'd also had a really recent experience where I had lost sleep because of the stresses of COVID and because of the unraveling of the SurveyMonkey acquisition, and then had recovered sleep and knew exactly how powerful that could be for somebody, how transformative. I liken it to, walking out of a black and white television set onto a 4K, Technicolor movie where all of a sudden, you realize what experience could be like. And that was transformative. And so people could see that. I think another dimension of it was I approached it with a tremendous amount of respect. One of the first things that I did was actually to travel to Finland, where the majority of the technical staff was located at the time. And I wanted to go within the first week because I wanted to show them that they had my respect and that I understood that they were the people who created the value in the company, the algorithms, the hardware, the software, the experience that Oura delivers. And I got COVID that week. And I was like, I'm still coming. I'm going to come. And they were like, yeah, no, please don't come. You've got COVID. Please don't come. So I came, whatever it was, I get like 10 days after. And I came and expressed my respect. And I think that made a huge impact on them because, to know that the person who's been anointed as the leader of the company both understands them and wants to learn more about them and wants to respect them, I think it just went an incredibly long way.
Yeah, so when you took over in 2022, Oura had sold about 1 million rings. Now you've more than doubled that to 2.5 million. What's the single biggest strategic decision that you made that really unlocked that growth?
Yeah, I don't know that I could say that it was any single decision. There's never a silver bullet, which I think is a good leadership lesson. It's any successful business is built through a lot of some big ideas, but a lot of small, important ideas that are executed well. But if I had to sort of pin it down to three, I think one would be the focus on women. One of the things that the Oura Ring can do quite well is measure your temperature, and that is a key to unlocking where you are in your cycle. We kind of realized this early on, and it unlocked a bunch of applications for women. One being the ability to predict the day that your period is going to arrive. Another is understanding when you're ovulating, and therefore your fertility is at its peak. Or maybe better yet, and we do this with a partner called Natural Cycles, when you can have sex without worrying about getting pregnant. Understanding how your body changes as you go through your cycle. These are all things that were just not in the marketplace. And so we really nailed it for women. And that was a huge unlock for the business. Most people think of wearables as sort of a fitness tool. How do I get fit? And at the time, no one was really solving for even the fitness needs of women specifically. They had a pink bracelet or something like that, a pink Fitbit, but it wasn't really specifically tuned to a woman's physiology. So that was one. The second was retail. You look at this device here, you kind of see it. It has the properties of jewelry, right? It has a particular finish. It looks a certain way on your hand. It has to sort of fit into your life as a piece of kit that you would wear on your body 24/7. And what we realized was that people wanted to see it. We had been up until that point just a purely D2C business where you could go to the website and you could see it, or maybe you could see it on a friend. And a lot of our sales came from referrals. But if you wanted to see it, try it on, look how it looks against your skin, you needed a way to do that. And retail really unlocked that. So we went big into retail. And this was a controversial decision at the time because we had been D2C up until that point, but we went deep with Target, Best Buy, Amazon to really unlock retail. And that was a big second factor. And then the third factor, and this is really interesting, and maybe most people may not even know this, but you can use what's called your health savings account or your flexible spending account, HSA or FSA, funds to purchase an Oura Ring. And at the time, buying a wearable, the kinds of wearables you could get were the sorts of things that you would get for a purely, kind of medical context. They were not more broadly written a health wearable. They were like things that you would get for very specific to a particular health context. So when we got the HSA, FSA kind of unlock, we turned that on, and all of a sudden we helped people realize that they could have access to this product and they could use these funds, which are effectively pre-tax funds, and apply them to something that was going to help their preventative health. And that was a huge unlock. That was remarkable. So those three things were big strategic elements that drove the business.
We'll be back with the rest of my conversation with Tom Hale in just a moment. I'm sure you can see Tom is a deeply empathetic leader. And people sometimes try to make empathy seem like something soft and fluffy. But Johnny Taylor at the Society of Human Resource Management has a different take, and I love it. He encourages leaders to treat empathy like a business imperative, because it is one.
People hear empathy and conflate it with sympathy. That's the number one problem. And sympathy is softer by definition, right? It's someone loses a parent or sibling or whatever, and you sympathize with them. Versus empathizing, this whole concept of every day trying to experience life, not just through your eyes, but through the eyes of the person on the other side of the conversation. It's built into why I think we've had this real diversity problem in our organizations, is because we can achieve diversity. We go hire people who are different. By definition, you get diversity, but then we're not looking at them through their diverse experiences and trying to do it through the lens of empathy. As a result, You're bringing them in and they're leaving very quickly. So it is now a business imperative and a knowledge-based economy, David. You don't have the luxury of having people just come and leave. Bringing people into an environment that's not particularly empathetic when they can go get other jobs means you're going to lose them and thus lose the game. We did some research just recently at SHRM. 93% of employees said they would leave a job that they like, okay, a job where I'm perfectly fine, to go work for a more empathetic organization. So if that doesn't make the case that this empathy is a business imperative and not just a feel-good moral imperative, I don't know what does. 9 out of 10 of your employees are saying, listen, I'll go to the guy across the street if we're in a place where I think people are more empathetic in their approach. Again, not to be confused with sympathy. It's empathy.
Go back and listen to my entire conversation with Johnny, episode 52, here on How Leaders Lead. You're in a business where month after month you have to earn your customers' trust so they renew your subscription. What's the most important things you do to keep people engaged and loyal?
Look, I love subscription businesses for just that reason, which is that you kind of got to, you got to earn your customer loyalty every month. We were at the time just a monthly subscription, and if you're not delivering enough value, they're not going to retain. And if you're delivering plenty of value but your price is too high, they're not going to retain. So a way to think about it is there's an equation in my head that's V over P, value over price. And in a subscription business, if your V over P ratio is right around 1, meaning your value and your price are roughly equal, you're not going to retain people because they have to think about it. Oh, am I getting enough value this month? And no. Think about like Netflix or something like that. We're like, oh, do I want to subscribe to this now or not? The thing is, the V to P ratio for Netflix or Spotify or anything like that is huge. You get access to every song you might ever possibly want to hear for $9.99 a month. Wow, that's a great bargain. Going to totally retain on that. And so I really love subscription business models. And for Oura, what I realized, and what maybe the company realized, there was a lot of anxiety about going to a subscription business model. So it's a little bit unusual in the world of hardware. Generally, you buy a piece of hardware and then you pay for it and then you get to use it as much as you want. You don't have to pay a monthly fee. And what we realized was that if what we're providing is a check engine light for your body, or we're providing you insights about your body that you don't know, that you're not aware of, the value of that, the V, is huge. And the price, we charge $6 a month. The price is low. So if the V to P ratio is, more than 2 or, more than 10, you're going to retain customers. And so we were both, I think, a little apprehensive, but very, very positively surprised at the retention because that V to P ratio is so strong.
That makes so much sense. And then the other thing you said makes a lot of sense is people want to see the ring. They want to see what it looked like. And that retail really helped to kick off your business. So has there been a challenge in how you look at the design of the ring versus the capacity of the ring to deliver all the health monitor stuff that you wanted to do?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because there's this utility part of it. It's the features, it's the benefits, it's the data. And in fact, I think utility is how technology marketing has been, forever. It's like, oh, we've got the new 32 megabytes, the next generation. It's all about the utility and the features and the feeds and the speeds. And I think what was really interesting for me about Oura was that it was also a design and maybe aesthetic decision that people were making, and that they really liked the aesthetics of it. And so I'll give you the very concrete example, which is that we have different finishes for the ring. There's like black and silver, gold, and what we call brushed silver, which is basically kind of a matte titanium. And then we have the premium finishes, which include gold. And what we learned was that people actually felt that seeing a different price point for those rings actually made sense to them. They were happy to have an entry price point for black and silver, and happy or maybe willing to pay a premium for gold and for brushed silver. So it was a really interesting learning to sort of understand that there's value in here that's not just the utility. It's, does it fit in with my jewelry? I'm a gold jewelry person. I'm somebody who wants it to look a certain way. And that kind of, I almost want to call it fashion, even though I don't think we would ever describe ourselves as a fashion company. But it really came to roost. And I learned this firsthand when we introduced a ring that we partnered with Gucci on. And this ring was amazing. It was a Gucci design, and it was black and had sort of gold braid around the edge and the interlocking gold G and stuff like that. I mean, it looked like something that you might, if you were Caesar, you might wear to a gladiatorial combat in the Colosseum. I mean, it was like it was a really amazing thing to look at. And when we were talking to the team at Gucci, we were trying to decide how to price it, and they said, "Oh, well, you should price it at €1,000." And I was like, "You're kidding me! There's no way we can charge 1,000. Like the utility, we charge $300 for that utility." And they're like, "No, no, no, you don't understand. You don't understand what you've got here. It's amazing." We priced it at €1,000, and we sold through, in 5 weeks, everything we'd built. We had to go and do another manufacturing run. And it's one of these things where like the intangible value of how it looked, what it meant to own it, what it signified, the fact that it was Gucci, all these things really carried through into that value. There were intangibles in the V over P in that case.
What's the single biggest behavior that you're really trying to drive and reinforce in Oura? I know you have a number of core values, like most companies, but what's the thing that you think is the most important?
Well, I think maybe the most important is trust. One of our values is earn trust, and maybe it's that relationship that a company has with, in our case, the Oura member, where we have to earn their trust, which means that we have to be right. If we make a prediction about you being sick in a couple of days, or that your what we call your major symptoms are being flagged, which tells you that your body's been stressed for in a certain way, you have to be right. Because if you do that a bunch of times and you're not right, then it's like, well, I don't trust this thing. It's not going to tell me anything. It's actually subtracting value from my life. So another way of thinking about trust is we have sort of a sacred duty to protect and to serve you as the Oura member. Like, we're here for you. We're not here for anybody else. We're not trying to sell you ads or sell you some other product. We're here to protect you and make you healthy. And that's such an important part of what we do. And it's such an important value, I think, that we at the company, we've made it one of the core things that we do, is that we earn your trust. And that starts with getting it right, but it also continues with making sure that that we're there only for you. We're not trying to sell you something else. We're not trying to we're trying to make sure you're living a long and healthy life.
How do you assess somebody's ability to engender trust when you're interviewing them?
God, it's such a great question. I think authenticity. I think we've had roughly 100,000 human generations of humanity, where you, based on how someone is looking at you or talking to you or moving their body or expressions on their face, whether or not you believe them. I think we've developed some incredible kind of subroutines in our brains for determining, is this somebody who's going to try and help me or hurt me. Even back from the very early days of humanity, where we were just lifting up from the savannas of Africa. So I think we have a lot of, actually, call it gut instincts that come to mind. People can see authenticity and they can sense it, and they can also just as easily sense inauthenticity. So in many ways, for me, it's a sense. And if someone uses a lot of phrases like, well, to be honest, David, to be honest, you sort of have to be like, well, wait, are you saying you're not being honest the rest of the time? So I think some of it is just like, can you feel that trust coming off that person? Can you do that? Now, engendering trust is different. You have to be authentic, but you also have to have something that you want to, build trust in. And so I do lean hard on people who have a commitment to the mission and commitment to the values and have a passion for it. Someone says to me, I'm coin operated and I want more money. And I'm immediately like, okay, yeah, but this is what we do here. We're about making people healthier and live longer lives. That's what we're doing. I want someone who's to join the company who wants to do that.
That's great stuff. And, you mentioned that you're in a wearable category. That may not be the broadest definition of it, but, in that category, you've got Apple, Samsung, Whoop, how do you look at competition? And, they're constantly innovating. When you see competitors do something, what gets on your radar screen? Because you can follow them and try to match everything they do. How do you stay true to who you are, but still change?
Yeah, it's such a great question. Obviously, you keep track of what everybody's doing, and I think we've got some things that are very special, about the product that I think are call it your defensive moat. Part of it is that it's a very comfortable thing to wear. It doesn't light up in the middle of the night when you're trying to sleep. It doesn't do that. It has a very long battery life. It has, it's the most accurate because when you measure from this side on the human body, it turns out this is a very accurate place to measure from. And if you think about, when you go to the hospital, where do they put the sensor? Well, they put the sensor on the tip of your finger. They don't put it on the back of your wrist. And the reason for that is that it's arterial blood flow that comes down your arm, and it's the strongest right there. And the sensors are looking through, 2 millimeters of uniform tissue, not, a bunch of hair, bone, sinew, tattoos, sun discoloration, that you might have on the outside of your arm. Your distal, kind of skin coloration is generally lighter, no matter if you're, what shade of color skin you have, it's lighter on the inside. So all these technologies around light. So that is really a fundamental kind of advantage. But what you can't do is forget that, like, you have to serve your customer, and your customer is different. Most of our competitors are really oriented around fitness, and fitness, is a part of the health equation, but it's not all of it. And I'll give you an example. If you're somebody who's managing a chronic illness, and your fitness wearable says, "Hey, you need to get your workout in. You're not straining yourself enough." It's kind of the wrong message for that person, right? Or if you're, somebody who's had, heaven forbid, some kind of eating disorder, and it's like, "Hey, you've burst through your calorie target for the day. You need to stop eating." All these things are triggering to people who maybe have a different orientation. So our strategy has been to really focus on health and maybe think about health very broadly and over a long period of time. It's not just about, like, "Hey, what's your heart rate right now?" It's like, how has your heart rate changed over the last 6 months? And what does that say? And what does that mean? And let's interpret that. Let's just not give you data. Let's give you an experience that interprets that and guides you in terms of healthy behaviors, and guides you in terms of the things that might be going on with you. And that, in some sense, what do they say? A tiger can't change its stripes. And that's a real advantage, because, if you've anchored yourself on one thing or another, it's very difficult to be something else, because then you're like, "Well, we're not that thing anymore that you used to buy us for. We're something else." And that's tricky. It's tricky for any business.
Yeah. This has been so much fun, Tom, and I want to have some more with my lightning round of questions. So are you ready for these?
Okay. Go for it.
Okay. The 3 words that best describe you.
Curious, driven, and approachable.
If you could be one person for a day beside yourself, who would it be?
It would be Steve Jobs.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
I used to say, "You cannot work at a company with me and have conference room cake." And do you know what I mean by conference room cake?
Explain
It's
that.
like when it's your birthday, and and they're like,
Yeah.
"Hey, come into the conference room. We're going to have a birthday celebration for you." And they bring out conference room cake, and it's like, "Happy birthday, David," but they spelled it with 2 V's or something like that. And you're just like, it's the most inauthentic thing. Like, I really believe if you're going to celebrate something, like, do it with, like, real gusto and real authenticity. And, like, if you're going to have a birthday celebration, like, don't do it in a conference room. Like, do something really legitimately authentic and fun.
Who would play you in a movie?
Nick Cage.
What's your current streak of nights in bed by 9:30?
Oh my God. I don't know if I can tell you that off top of my head. I guess 0, because I went to bed. I went to bed at 10:15 last night, but I'm generally in bed by 9:30. So I'd say pretty good.
What's the best part about living in San Francisco?
Well, San Francisco is just such a vibrant place. I mean, so much of the future is being invented here. I mean, just think about it. A couple of years ago, self-driving cars started appearing on the streets, and it was amazing. You're like, "I can't believe it. I just saw a car go by. There's no one driving it." Now, of course, it's completely banal. You're just like, "Oh yeah, here's 30 Waymos queued up outside of this conference venue. Big deal." And the thing is, it's like, it's a miracle. These cars are driving around. So this idea that the future is being invented here, it's just not equally distributed. And that's the thing I love about San Francisco.
The biggest lesson backgammon has taught you?
The worm will turn. I played backgammon with my dad for a good portion of my life, and he was a very good backgammon player. And I think I'd lost my allowance to him more or less from, a very young age, late until more or less his departure from this planet. And the reality is that you can be the best player, and over time you will win. If you're a better player, you will win. But there will be moments when your opponent will roll 3 double sixes in a row and you will lose, and it'll be heart crushing. And that you have to be prepared for that, because that's the world. The world is a place where luck will turn against you at some point.
Besides your family, what's your most prized possession?
Well, I would say I'm a big fan of books. I love to read, and I have a big book collection, and some of those books are special. They've been autographed by the author. So I'd say my book collection.
If I turned on the radio in your car, what would I hear?
St. Vincent is my favorite. She's a songwriter and a guitarist and a rocker, and she is incredible. And if she's listening at all, St. Vincent, I love you, and I would do anything to see. I've seen her probably 5 times this year. She's amazing.
What's something about you few people would know?
Well, I think most people don't know that I'm a really, really good backgammon player. So if you ever want to roll some dice, I'm always ready to play.
That's great. And you're out of the lightning round. So good job there, Tom. We've talked a lot about leadership, but how do you think about leading at home?
Yeah, I mean, my kids are my greatest pride and joy. They're amazing. They're creative and surprising and challenging and wonderful and brilliant. And I think in many ways, I think the biggest thing that I had to realize was that they are very different from me. And I think this is true with every generation. So this is no great insight. But you have to let your kids find their way. And I think that is actually true of a team or of people that you're managing. And the story I would tell is that I was the youngest in my family. I had a younger sister, but there was a big gap between the older ones and us. And so I was kind of like the youngest for a long time. And I was not really, I think, maybe confident in my ability to care for people until I became a manager and realized that part of the job of being a manager is that you have to care and feed and guide and school and direct the people who work for you. And it's a sacred, kind of duty that you've undertaken as their manager, let alone their leader, just a line manager with 4 or 5 reports. And I realized that, like, through that experience of becoming a manager and learning how to manage, that was going to be some incredibly powerful tools for being a father. And in fact, I became a father in my mid 30s, but I became a manager in my late 20s. And I think that, those 7 years of being a manager taught me a lot about what it means to be a good father. Now I don't manage my kids, but you know what? When they come to me and they're like freaking out or they're upset, one of the things that I learned as a manager is you just keep calm everybody down. Just receive it. Don't react. Keep your mouth shut. Listen. Don't talk. And those are the same skills that I employ as a parent.
Yeah, fantastic. And looking ahead, what do you see as your unfinished business?
Good gosh, unfinished business. Well, let's see. I probably should make my bed. That's something I didn't do this morning. But look, I think I would love to have a big impact on the health of people across the planet. And I think, the work that I'm doing at Oura is some of the most meaningful work that I've had the opportunity to do in my entire life. And I think I won't rest until we've made a huge, huge impact on tens of millions of people. And this doesn't mean we have to win to the exclusion that everybody else needs to lose. I don't think that's it. It's that I think wearables are going to be incredibly powerful for humanity because everyone, has a supercomputer. And everyone should have a device on their body which is measuring their health and helping them, understand it. And there should be some sort of machine intelligence that's looking over them to help them live the best, longest, healthiest life with their family and with their loved ones. And if you can do that, I think that's a pretty good reason to get out of bed in the morning.
Last question. What's one piece of advice you'd give to anyone who wants to be a better leader?
I think sometimes people think that home and work, it can be the same thing, and they're not. Maybe during COVID, you ended up sleeping at the office by working at home, and so they're not the same thing. but they are two sides of the same coin. And so maybe the piece of advice I would give is that don't forget that everybody has a personal life and that people are complicated and that you need to think about the whole person, not just the person who shows up at work. You need to have some empathy and understanding for who someone is and where they are in their journey. And you got to meet them where they are. And you got to do that not just for your employees, but for your customers. And not just for your employees and your customers, but for your stakeholders and for your board and your investors. And you got to show up for everybody in the world in a way that has some empathy for them. Because if you do that, you're gonna think of them as a whole person. And that's going to help you serve them better. That's going to help you make better products for them. That's going to help you make better decisions for them or with them. And it's going to make you, I think, a better person, the best person you can be.
That's great, Tom. And you've offered so much insight in this conversation that we've had. And I want to thank you so much for your time. And I love your mission. And I love the success that you're having making the world a better place. So congratulations for all you're doing. And congratulations to the Oura team.
Well, thank you, David. Appreciate you having me on the show today. And it was great chatting with you.
In every leadership role, there are these dynamic tensions. You got to meet people where they are while also pushing them forward. You've got to deliver on short-term results without losing sight of the long-term goals. It's a balancing act. But listening to Tom, you realize the balance in leadership doesn't just mean staying in the middle and hoping things even out. It's about sensing the tilt and knowing how and when to shift your weight. You're always reading the room, scanning ahead, and using your own force to keep all those dynamic tensions in check. So here's your challenge this week. Think back to that boat analogy that Tom shared. Is there a part of your business where it feels like everyone is rushed to one side of the ship? If so, what kind of rebalancing does your team need for you to do? Responding thoughtfully when everybody else is reacting is exactly what great leaders do, and why their teams trust them to be at the helm. So do you want to know how leaders lead? What we learned today is that great leaders are a force of balance. Coming up next on How Leaders Lead, just in time for the start of the NFL season, I'm talking with Clark Hunt, the chairman and CEO of the Kansas City Chiefs, and it is my football team. So be sure you subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss it. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of How Leaders Lead, where every Thursday you get to listen in while I interview some of the very best leaders in the world. I make it a point to give you something simple on each episode that you can apply to your business so that you will become the best leader that you can be.